Did Christ find a church? Does it have a continuous history? And can it be found today?
Welcome to the Ancient Church. I'm your host, Polina Leiser. Christians often talk about salvation, but not always in the same way. For some, it's a moment of faith. For others, it's a lifelong journey. So how does the Orthodox Church understand salvation? Well, it's a big honor for me today to have Bishop Nikolai on the show to tackle this topic. Bishop Nikolai is the Rector of All Saints Russian Orthodox Church in Las Vegas, and their website is RussianOrthodoxLasVegas.org. Your Grace, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Paulina, for asking me.
You know, you're the first bishop I'm interviewing. I've obviously known and met bishops. Archbishop Kirill was my bishop for many, many years, so I love him. But for those in the audience who don't know what the difference is between the priests and the bishops, could you please briefly tell us?
Well, you have to have a bishop to have a priest. Bishops can make priests, and then bishops together make bishops. And of course, bishops make everything down below too, deacons, subdeacons, and readers. In the early church, that was established as time progressed. In the early church, the order of bishop was a little bit probably what the priests are today, but that changed throughout history. And then we have this very formal situation of the hierarchy of the church.
And so not every...
Bishops are typically over, just as a note, bishops are typically over diocese, which is a territory. And then there are what's called vicar bishops or assistant bishops, so to speak, who help the ruling bishop in their diocese, that territory. And then those ruling bishops are part of a larger church. You know, we're part of ROKOR, the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, which is part of the Moscow Patriarchate, which of course is worldwide too.
But then not every priest is going to be or can be a bishop, right? Because you do, one of the things that the bishops do is they take monastic vows.
Yes, all the bishops have to be monastics. Now, we have bishops whose wives have died, and they're consecrated bishop. But yes, they have to take monastic vows because the focus of a bishop needs to be totally on the church.
Mm-hmm. But you, I know I'm going away from our main topic. I just found your story so fascinating how from the very early age you wanted to be a priest. And then in the seminary you took monastic vows. And so you grew up in the Orthodox family.
Serbian. Yeah, both parents are Serbian. My father came to this country in 1909 from what was then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Later on became Yugoslavia. And then now in present time, that's actually Serbia again. But he's from the area of Herzegovina, which is part of that territory south of the Belgrade area. My mother, her family, her mother and father came to America about the same time as my father. There was 25 years difference between them, and she was born in Butte, Montana. So yes, I was raised in a Serbian Orthodox family. Both parents were active in the church, and yes, I wanted to be a priest from the time I was a little boy. I tell that story that my baba gave me a plastic cross, and I'd put a dish towel on my back and cut up bread and go around and have people kiss the cross in my hand, and I'd give them the bread like we do in church. So that's where it started.
And then in the seminary, that's where you after the seminary, you were ordained priest. And if I remember correctly, you wanted to do missions, and that's why you decided to take the monastic vows?
Well, there's more to it than that. I was actually dating a young lady in seminary for about 2 years, and we started talking about getting married. And she told me one time when we were meeting before Christmas vacation that she wanted to be my wife, but she couldn't be a priest's wife. And the reason for that was the priest's wife there in the Serbian church in St. Nicholas in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, was I would use her today as an example of what a priest's wife should be. She was everywhere, involved in everything. You never heard her talking with anybody about anybody else. She was really a perfect example of that. And I told this young lady that you can't use her as an example. She's an exception. But we left it at that. Then I came home for Christmas vacation, and my mother had cancer about 5 years before that. And she waited for me to come home at Christmas time. We went to the doctor, and the cancer had come back. And at that point, he gave her less than 6 months to live. And she was very supportive of me in my desire to be a priest. And I thought, well, this was a sign that I should just think about the priesthood and put this other stuff aside. So I petitioned the bishop, who knew me since I was a young boy, and the priest in the parish, who was my spiritual father, knew me, and I petitioned to take monastic vows and to be ordained, and that's how that came about. So I wanted to do missionary work because I didn't have a family. It'd be easier to do that. You could get a job and do a parish and then move on to the next place. That was my intention. I did that in the Serbian church. I did that in the OCA. I'm not doing that now in Roquefort, except here in Las Vegas, which is itself is a full-time parish and a full-time responsibility. So that's kind of the story in short.
Yeah, well, there is that.
I was dumped.
Well, look at your life and the mission you can do now, the mission work you're doing with your program too, which is on YouTube. What's the name of it again? The program that you have?
Well, it's called Orthodox Life with Bishop Nikolai.
Okay, yeah.
And I always tell people when we have the opening things, I am Bishop Nikolai. So it's been fun. I was in favor of that, to be honest with you. We did Q&A here in the parish, in the trapeza, once a month after we had lunch, and people would give their questions, and we'd just take the questions and answer them. And one of the ladies said, why don't we use our YouTube channel? And I said, our YouTube channel? She said, yeah, the church has a YouTube channel. I didn't know that. Well, I wasn't totally in favor of doing this, but I said, okay, we can try it. Well, it's been really successful in the parish. We are reaching more people. We're getting more comments. We seem to get enough questions from our people to keep it going. So it's been kind of exciting.
Well, I found it to be a wonderful resource, so thank you for that. Okay, going back to our topic of salvation, when we use that word, what does it actually mean in the Orthodox Church?
Heaven. That's salvation, right? But it's a long process. It's a lifelong process in the Orthodox Church. From the time that we're baptized until our last breath, we're fighting for salvation. So we have to live a good life. We have to do prayer and fasting as prescribed by the church, to attend the church divine services as best we can, especially on Sunday mornings, and to prepare ourselves for a life of orthodoxy as an example to other people. So it's a lifelong journey. Sometimes we're not so good and we're kind of jeopardizing our salvation, but we have the opportunities to turn around and come back through confession and repentance and receiving Holy Communion. We always get the question, from the Protestant side, are you saved? And I have to kind of chuckle, because salvation, again, right down to that last moment, we jeopardize the loss of that salvation. But Christ gave us the opportunity and the means by which we can attain salvation.
You mentioned the last moment there, and that's a question I was going to ask later, but I'll go ahead and throw it in now. I've had these conversations with people both in the Protestant Orthodox background where they don't know whether their loved one was a Christian and they die. And so there's this fear, what if they're not saved? And what's your take on that theory or idea that in the very last moment a person can still be saved? We don't know how long that second is, whether it lasts a lifetime. But what do you think about that?
It's a good question. Last night, after the pre-sanctified liturgy, one of my young men came to me, I think he's 16 now, and told me that his father died. And he wasn't living with the father, he lives here with his mother, they're divorced. And I asked him what religion he was, and he said, well, he was Christian, but didn't really practice anything. And we talked a little bit about that. And his concern was, having a service. And of course, we can't do that in our church. We don't force anybody in our church to participate in our services. It's free will to come here and participate. But I told him he can pray for his father. He should do that. And then we went through the the process of what the Orthodox believe, because it was a good opportunity to teach him and to bring him some comfort too. We hope that those people who maybe didn't live a good life or who maybe weren't even baptized, we don't know those things. We leave that up to God. That's in his hands to decide where they're at. We don't make those decisions, and we shouldn't be talking about other people and saying they don't have any means of salvation either. We believe that orthodoxy is the best way for salvation if you practice the faith the proper way. But for us to demean others in that, it's not the thing that we should be doing.
And speaking of practicing, where do faith and works come together, and how do you understand that? Because I know that's another kind of stumbling block for people, that works don't really matter for salvation.
Well, works do matter. We're supposed to. Look at the Beatitudes. We just read them last night at the Presanctified in the Gospel. We're mandated to do good works. Through good works, through faith. Through our faith, we believe in doing good works will help other people and will help us in our journey for salvation. So it's very important. You can't separate the two. It's the other thing that I always tell people, that Orthodoxy is not a salad bar. We don't come and pick and choose the things that we like, and the other things we don't, we put them aside. We don't do that. It's the whole thing. It's the whole ball of wax, so to speak. I keep kind of a phrase that I thought was pretty catchy called oinos, Orthodox in name only, like rhinos, Republican name only, whatever. We have a lot of those, probably more oinos in Orthodoxy than not, who say they're Orthodox and really aren't practicing their faith in any way. Doesn't mean that they can't, and doesn't mean that they won't. It just means that it's just a fact. And I know that, from my own life, where you see the numbers of Orthodox Christians who we say that we have, and how many people actually are coming to church and practicing. The numbers are really pretty dramatically different.
Scripture describes the path to salvation as narrow and difficult. So I guess that's something for us to expect, but is still achievable. So how difficult should we expect this path to salvation be? And I guess how do we make it?
Well, I guess we'd have to read the scriptures and see where Christ said life was going to be easy. I haven't read that anywhere. In fact, he said, if you want to follow me, take up your cross. Give everything else up. Well, what are those things that we give up? People right away think, oh, I've got to give up my job. I've got to give up my car. I've got to give up my house. That's not what it is. It's putting aside yourself and living for Christ. We talked about the rich man and the getting through the eye of the needle. There's nothing wrong with being rich. What's wrong is when wealth becomes your God. If you're doing good things with what you have, what God has blessed you with, you'll be blessed too. And that poor person too is blessed for what they give in a different sort of proportion. They give much more probably than those who have material wealth. You see that in the churches. People who are working there all the time, and they're usually the folks who don't have a lot of means or whatever, but they want to sacrifice for the church, and they're making that effort. The path might be narrow, but isn't it better for us to see a path that's narrow than to have a path that has too many off-ramps? Those off-ramps are called passions and sin. So we want to stay on that narrow path and follow. Church gives us that opportunity.
That's a very
blessed.
That's a very good point about us wanting to have a narrow path that we want to see and follow. We're going to take a quick break, but before we do, tell us a little bit about your church there in Las Vegas.
Oh, sure, yeah. The parish here is, we're going to be celebrating our 10th anniversary in our own facility next February. The parish was actually established about 4.5 years before that. For the first 6 months, there were 3 services on a Saturday by a priest from LA. I started serving here the first 2012, in January 2012, and we were only serving once a month. I was serving the cathedral in Los Angeles during that period of time until our rented facility was going to be ready. It was supposed to be ready for Pascha, but it wasn't ready until the fall. When we started in the fall of that year, we started with vigil on Saturday night and liturgy every Sunday morning, and we did the holy days. When we had the vespers or vigils, and we continued on. We've not missed that since we started. And then, like I say, about 10 years ago, we moved into this facility, and we've been growing like amazingly. It's just been a real blessing. The parish here is very dynamic in how we approach things and who are part of our parish. A lot of new people coming, and they're coming from all different walks of life and all different ethnicities. The parish is very mixed. I have another priest here with me, Father Dimitri, and we have lots of potential for our own people to move up into the ranks of the clergy. I think we're going to have at least 3 people going into the extension program in the fall for the diaconal program. So it's very exciting. I was here by myself for 10 years. Then Father Felipe came here for a year. He's a priest who's now in the Philippines, and that was due to visa issues that he could only be here for a year. And then Father Dimitri has been here now. This is his 3rd year, and he's here with his wife, and they have 5 children, 1 more on the way. And so it's the dynamics are very positive. I encourage people, to not be embarrassed when they visit Las Vegas for other things, to come to church on Sunday morning. We're not going to judge you for why you're here.
That's a beautiful invitation. And again, this is All Saints Russian Orthodox Church in Las Vegas, and the website is RussianOrthodoxLasVegas.org. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Ancient Church. Today we're talking to Bishop Nikolai, Rector of the All Saints Russian Orthodox Church in Las Vegas. And before we go back to our topic of salvation, Your Grace, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions we got from our audience. And the first one comes from Jacob. He says, I've heard that the Orthodox Christian Church has a different number of books in its Old Testament. Is it true? And if so, why?
The Orthodox Church has 70 books that we call canonical books. And those are the books that were established, Old and New Testament books that were established by the Ecumenical Council. It doesn't mean that there aren't more books, but these were the books that were set aside by the Church to give us the basis for what we have in the Old and New Testament.
And then a question from Julie. Why does the Orthodox Church give such a central place to the Mother of God?
Yeah, how important are our mothers? I think we talked about that a little bit in the first segment, maybe touched on that. But the Mother of God is a very special place in our church when we have to think it in terms of how she became this central figure. She became the mother of God, Theotokos, Mati Bogia, and then she remained pure before, during, and after birth. So this made her a very special person. And I always use this example when people ask me, well, there's no real place for women in the Orthodox Church. You have to laugh. It's through a woman that God came into the world. Of course, that was all his hand, but the Mother of God then is given that special place in all of our churches on the icon screen. Christ on the right side and she on the opposite side of the royal doors. We pray to her as this great intercessor for us, and for monastics, she's most important. She becomes our mother, and even in my own life, my mother died 3 months after I was ordained, took monastic vows. So the Mother of God really took that special place, very profound place in my own life.
That is very special. Thank you for sharing.
When I had a conversation with a woman here a couple of weeks ago, called me, and I mentioned this in one of my podcasts about wanting to do some kind of a program. She was very vague about all of it. And in the end, she said, well, what place is there for women in the Orthodox Church? I knew right away, where she was coming from. We're looking for some reason. I said, men can't have babies. We have to know our roles in the church. We accept those roles as God gave them to us and not try to change them. You can't make a man a woman. You can't make a woman a man. Men are men, women are women. We accept that role. And whatever we struggle in those sexes is part of life. We can change ourselves to be better in character, but not physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, going back to our topic of salvation. We're recording this interview during Great Lent. Easter, Pascha is coming, and there's obviously a connection there. So if you could explain to our audience, both Orthodox and non-Orthodox, in your view, what did Christ accomplish on the cross, and why is it so important to our salvation?
Let's talk a little bit about the preparation for Pascha, which, typically people know it as Easter, but there's 40 days of this Lenten period, this journey that we're spending with Christ in the wilderness. We too, through the Lenten services, the lack of brightness in the churches are reminding us that we live in a very dark place, but that we can come to that light through Christ. And we spend this journey of fasting and prayer, which is more intense during Lent, 40 days. And then after that 40 days, we have Holy Week, which is another week. So we actually have 48 days from the time we start fasting until Pascha. And we really celebrate, our opportunity to be redeemed and to have salvation through Christ. So it's a very important journey for us to take, very serious for us, during these times. I really try to emphasize for people to meditate on the prayer of St. Ephrem, because that prayer is so powerful as an opportunity to reflect on daily what we've done and where we've lacked and how we're trying to proceed to get closer to Christ. His sacrifice for us on the cross is the greatest sacrifice that can ever be made. And he did that as an example to show us how great and how awesome and how mysterious this sacrifice is, for us to recognize that there's nothing we go through in life that is as difficult.
That's something to, like you said, something to meditate on, that thought alone. For someone who may not be familiar with Christianity in general, because I have many friends who are not even Christians, and they don't always understand, so he died on the cross, but so what? How did that now give you eternal life? Is that okay topic? I mean, is that an okay question to ask right now? Is it another show? Can you maybe briefly explain how's that sacrifice giving us eternal life now?
Yeah, well, there's more to that than that. He didn't just die on the cross. He rose from the dead. That's the whole key here. From the time he died on the cross and he went to hell to loose the bonds of those held in captive in Hades, to the time of his resurrection in 3 days, that is our life. So it's not just dying on the cross. The dying on the cross was only the beginning. The resurrection is the goal, to show that we too can live with Christ after this life. This life is very temporal, very short. People who have been sick or have had losses in their lives, they understand how quickly that can occur. We have to have hope for that life afterwards, or our lives here become hopeless too and empty.
Easter and Pascha are always so joyful, and we always feel just light, and it's hard to explain. But then life happens, and little by little we almost start losing it. How do you have a recipe on how can we keep that joy of Pascha with us?
Of course, every Sunday is a small Pascha in our church. We have to take that joy of Pascha as we spend the whole night praying, and then all of a sudden, here we are into the resurrection after 3 or 4 hours or 5 hours sometimes. But every Sunday is a small Pascha. We have to remember the joy and the glory of that moment of Pascha, and to take it with us to every Sunday as a small Pascha. I'm going to use that in a sermon. That's a good thing to remind me of. I use the example here that our church needs to be an oasis, because the world, lots of distractions out there. The first distraction you have after you leave the liturgy on Sunday morning is when you're driving out of the parking lot and someone cuts you off. That's the first distraction. So the church needs to be an oasis, a place where you feel safe, a place where you get regenerated, a place where we remind ourselves why we're there and with whom we're there. Because, we stand in our churches. We don't sit and cross our legs and our arms and watch the service. We stand ready to serve Christ. So when he comes that second time, we're ready to go. We're ready to move with him. So it's a particular relationship, an individual relationship. Doesn't mean we don't pray for other people. We do. That's what the service is there to provide for us. And that atmosphere needs to be that kind of place where you receive that kind of regeneration, so to speak.
Our life is a journey, and as you talked about in the first segment, as you mentioned, salvation is that lifelong process. How can a person, maybe someone watching today, know that they are on the right path and they are going towards that mark and towards salvation?
Well, I think people know that. They just deny it sometimes. They know what direction they're going. You have that sometimes with people say, "Oh, I'm going to be fine. I'm living with my boyfriend or my girlfriend, and I've got 3 illegitimate children, and I don't work, and I did all that, but I'm going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine." No, everything isn't going to be fine unless we're doing things right, and people know that. They'll make excuses why they're not doing it, and they're just excuses. But you know in your heart, when you look at yourself and you evaluate yourself, you know if you're on the right track. Admit it and make the change. If you're good, get better. If you're bad, become good.
And if someone watching today and is feeling what you're describing, or even more so knows or feels that they're too far from God today, what can they do as a first step or first, second, third step to get closer to God?
Just ask him. Ask him to come into your life. He's we talk about that, the icon of Christ knocking on the door. We all know that one, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there's no handle on that door on the outside. Christ doesn't have the handle on the outside. He's not going to come in. He has to be invited in. And he's invited in. You become filled with that joy. You have that opportunity now to have that relationship with your Creator. And he'll help you to be better if you submit yourself to his will and not your own.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up this interview?
Maybe. I would encourage people to watch these kinds of podcasts and stay off of the news podcasts. It's all meant to distract us. To get something edifying. There are some really good podcasts out there, theological podcasts. My podcast is meant to be on a parish level, to keep it in that kind of relationship. And you'll stay more focused on where you are. We don't need that other stuff. It's just to distract us and to pull us away from that journey of salvation.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Grace. Thank you again for joining us. Let me tell our audience, RussianOrthodoxLasVegas.org is the website for Bishop Nikolai, who is the Rector of All Saints Russian Orthodox Church in Las Vegas. And Bishop Nikolai is also the host of Orthodox Life with Bishop Nikolai. Easy to find on YouTube, many wonderful episodes and such a wonderful resource. Thank you again for doing that, and thank you for joining our show.
Thank you for having me, and God bless you.
Thank you. And everyone who tuned in today, thanks again. We appreciate your support. Submit your questions on our website, and we'll see you next time.